My name's Jann Freed, and you can call me Dr. Jann. I blog about leading, living, saging, positive aging, and leadership, servant leadership. And I created this Leadership Legacy Summit because legacy is my latest passion. So we're going to be talking about some of that today. But I welcome all of you. I'm thrilled that you're on the line. And as I said, we will have time for questions at the end. So Howard Behar's career in business spans over 50 years, all in consumer-oriented businesses covering several industries. He retired from Starbucks Coffee after 21 years, where he led both the domestic business as president of North America and was the founding president of Starbucks International. During his tenure, he participated in the growth of the company from 28 stores to over 15,000 stores spanning 5 continents. He served on the Starbucks board of directors for 12 years before retiring. He is very committed to not-for-profit organizations and community involvement. He's also committed to the development and education of our future leaders and has been a longtime advocate of the servant leadership model. He is also also authored 2 books on leadership titled It's Not About the Coffee and the Magic Cup. And I will say his books are very informative and interesting. I love them, Howard. For all these reasons, I wanted to include Howard in my Leadership Legacy Summit. In fact, I interviewed Howard for my last book called Leading with Wisdom, Sage Advice from 100 Experts. Howard definitely is a sage, so welcome.
I never thought of myself as a sage, but thanks.
You definitely are a sage, okay? And we'll kind of get into that. But I'm also an advocate of servant leadership, and you're just a great example. You walk the talk. Let's just start off with how do you define servant leadership?
Basically, it's the desire to serve. It's the understanding that as a leader, your primary role is to help people achieve what they want in their lives, to grow as human beings. And when you do that well, then they want to help you. And so, servant leadership is just that simple. It's just about that understanding that you got to give before you get.
Right.
You got to love before you're loved. You got to trust before, you got to give trust before you get trust.
I love that. And, I kind of say that leaders should clear obstacles, not be the obstacle.
Yeah.
And so, give us some specific examples. I mean, maybe from yourself, how you practice this, or you've seen it practiced with others, or what you advocated when you were involved with Starbucks. Give us some specific examples of how leaders practice this.
Well, there's a quote that I love that called the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom. And basically what it means is that you go out and you hire great people to come into your organization. You shouldn't give them all the rules to how they should do their job, but rather you should encourage them to try things, to experiment with things. And if they're the experts at sweeping the floor, then why wouldn't you trust their judgment on what kind of broom to use? And so servant leadership is just kind of about that, is giving trust and giving your people the right and the responsibility to make decisions in their area of responsibility.
Perfect. Exactly. And I do want to say, because we do have several people on the, listening, watching, please go ahead and put your questions in the chat because we will have time for those. Well, let's talk about leadership during this pandemic or leading during a crisis period. How do you think the pandemic is affecting leaders or leadership, and how might leadership change in the future? I mean, from what I've been reading, there are good examples out there, and there are really some bad examples out there, kind of anti-servant leadership. So, just share with us what's on your mind about this.
Well, in times of stress and struggle, your real personality, your real values come to bear. You can hide it in good times, but when things are tough, then all of a sudden people really show up as who they are. And you're seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing the leaders that are doing everything they can to support their people, that are, helping their people figure out how to survive during these times. And you're seeing leaders who stay in touch with their people, even although they may have gone through some layoffs. On the other hand, you're seeing leaders that basically have surrounded the company, have not helped their people. They've laid them off. They haven't done anything to help them in these struggling times. They've cut health insurance from them. They've done all the things to try to cut costs instead of trying to do all the things that help people survive. And during struggling times, we all have a responsibility to serve each other, and that's to help each other live and help each other, continue to grow as individuals, and help these people, create a better life even during the tough times, or at least maintain their lives. And you're seeing both sides of the equation, and we don't have to go into all the companies, but I'm particularly proud of Starbucks because of what they have done. I mean, they basically didn't lay anybody off. They had some where they couldn't when the stores were closed, but they gave people wages for a long period of time. They kept people on their health insurance program, and they've done the things that they needed to keep people whole. And I think during those kind of times, you can't be focused on your profits. You got to be focused on helping your people.
I could not agree more. Now, we are getting some great questions here, Howard. So I'm just going to ask some right now because they kind of fit into what we're talking about. One question says, I still bleed green, Howard. Can you comment on how Starbucks created such a great culture? So, maybe because again, we're going to see cultures, kind of falling apart here or fragmented. So, talk to us about maybe you just gave us specifics about the crisis, but how did Starbucks get to be such a great culture? And you had a lot to do with that.
Cultures are alive. They're not some program that you bring a consultant in to do. Your culture is who you are. It's your values and how those values inform your decisions and the actions you take in your lives or in your organization. And so Starbucks culture was born out of the people and out of the leadership of the people. It was born, Howard Schultz, Orrin Smith, and myself all came from some similar but different backgrounds, but none of the three of us came from wealthy backgrounds. Howard Schultz particularly came from a very poor background, and his father had an accident at work and didn't have any workman's compensation at the time, and they barely survived. And so Howard never forgot those lessons. Orrin Smith was raised by a single mother, head of household, with an alcoholic father that left the family of 4 or 5 children, and she had to figure out how to raise those kids. And he was raised in a farming community in Western Washington. I was raised by 2 immigrants that came to the United States in the early 1900s, survived the Depression. Both my parents were raised on dirt floors in Europe. So neither one of them, their expectations in life were to raise a family, to put food on the table and a roof over their heads themselves and for their kids. And so the three of us all came from kind of humble beginnings. And when we got together, we said, look, we want to be able to walk down the hallway, look at everybody in the face and say, we're all in this together. We didn't have any company boats. We didn't have at the time no company airplanes. We didn't have any health club memberships for executives. We didn't have any cars for executives. If you needed a car, as a matter of fact, we never even owned any cars. Everybody got the same. We got mileage for the work that we were doing. And so it was that simple. And then it was how we treat each other. The first guiding principle in our guiding principles is that we treat each other with respect and dignity. And it was purposely left undefined because that's a personal thing. How you would, if I was treating you with what I thought was respect and dignity, it's not enough. I have to know what you think about that. And so we had to adjust our behavior to the individuals. And, it was really people living our values. And, we made lots of mistakes. We didn't always do it. We screwed up a lot of times, but we always came back to that core of who we were and what mattered to us, even when we made the mistakes.
Yeah. And, kind of reinforces the title of your book, it's not about the coffee, No, it's very good. Here's another great question. We hear so much about leaders, how to support our people and teams. Any thoughts on how we as teams can support leaders? So kind of a mutual.
Well, servant leadership isn't a one-way street.
Okay.
Right? people that are on the team are also servant leaders. And they have to practice the same values and the same idea. Look, there's only one job that any of us will ever have as long as we're on this earth. And that is to serve other people. It doesn't make any difference whether you're a barista, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, whether you're a store manager, whether you're a consultant, it doesn't make any difference what you do in your life. There's only one reason any of us exist, and that's to serve human beings. And so whether you're working on a team and you report to someone, you're still a servant leadership. Your job is still to serve the people on your team, and that includes the person that you report to. So it's the two-way street that makes it work. And when that's really working well, it's like magic. Plus,
No.
at Starbucks, for most of the time, not all the time, like I said, but for most of the time, it was like magic. We had people that would get into the company that weren't servant leaders. And fortunately, we had in place mechanisms that would allow us to identify it. So most of the time pretty quickly, sometimes not, but most of the time pretty quickly. And we were able to either change the people, change how they behaved and how they acted, or change the people.
Right. No, that's excellent. Here's another good question, Howard. Over the last few months, have you noticed noteworthy acts of servant leadership in the public eye in connection with the COVID-19, maybe, or the reaction to racial injustice that's been so much in the news? And, there was an incident earlier, kind of a racial incident with Starbucks. Maybe just talk about that.
Well, we've had more than one. There's probably hundreds we'll never know about. Microaggressions or whatever it happens to be, things that somebody has said or somebody has done that wasn't keeping it with our values. But we had one, I think it was Philadelphia, where, if I remember right, where two gentlemen came into the store and they were waiting for somebody that they're going to have a meeting with, and they asked to go to the bathroom, and the store manager said, or whoever said, well, you have to buy something in order to go to the bathroom. So I don't know what took place, but they went and sat down and were waiting for their friend to come in. And the store manager, for some reason, which was not in keeping with Starbucks values, called the police and for no reason at all. They weren't doing anything to misbehave, but I guess they had asked them to leave for no reason. And it was a disaster. And it destroyed, in one little action or big action, it destroyed everything that we believed in as an organization. And, it happens. People get into the organization. And what's interesting about that, when the store manager was asked if these people were white, would you have done the same thing? And she acknowledged she wouldn't have. And, that person is not with the company anymore. But that tells you the problem that we have. For the most part, I don't know. There are probably some organizations that, maybe are intentionally racist. I don't know of any that certainly wouldn't acknowledge it. But most are not. And most are trying to do the right thing. But organizations are filled with people. And people make decisions based on their own backgrounds and their own beliefs sometimes, no matter what it says in the handbook, or no matter what we say. Treat each other with respect and dignity, and and understand that diversity is important in your organization. It still happens. Now, I'd like to say we recovered, but we had another incident that went public that happened in Minneapolis. I won't go into all the background of it, but it's made up of individuals. And, what you can do as an organization is constantly remind people of why we're here, what our values are, and how we treat people, no matter what the color of their skin, what religion they practice. And then try to sort out the people that can't live with that. And the only way you can do that is by making it okay for people to speak up. There can be no retribution. And, I hope that Starbucks has become better. And I think they learned a lot from it, that you can't just assume that you got to be on it all the time. I used to say I've given the same speech 1,000 different times, probably more than 1,000 different times, about people is what matters at Starbucks. People first, coffee second. Coffee is our art, it's our music, but it's people that make the music. And we have to understand, and I say we at Starbucks, that you can never assume that everybody understands or cares in the same way that you want them to. And so you constantly have to be reinforcing it and recognizing and rewarding the behavior that we want, and not rewarding the behavior that we don't want, and make sure that everybody understands. And I think they're trying to do that now and make sure that we don't forget.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I think so much of it is, you know, how you respond, how leaders respond. How, you know, are they willing to take responsibility? And yeah.
Yeah, you have to step up. You have to own it. Howard Schultz flew to Philadelphia. He was already retired. Well, he was just about to retire, actually, and this happened. And he went there and he talked with the community. They made a commitment to do diversity training, and which we always had, right? But obviously we didn't do a good enough job, and that began another commitment by the company to do the right thing.
Right.
They want great. I'll give you a great story. This goes way back in the company's history. I think at the time we had maybe 300, 400, 500 stores. I don't remember exactly. But we had what's called open forums. And in an open forum, you could ask any question that you wanted to the leadership in the company. And the leaders would all sit in front, you know, on bar stools. And there was no, I used to start the meeting with, there's nothing you're going to ask that's going to hurt our feelings or embarrass us. You know, we want to know what you're thinking and what your questions are. And so a young man named Daryl, I don't remember his last name, who was black, he worked in the design group. And he stood up, and there was a bunch of white people, leaders, sitting in the bar stools. And he asked a question. It was a simple question. And he said, when is somebody that looks like me going to be sitting on one of those bar stools? You could have heard, the room went just dead silence, right? Everybody thought, uh-oh, he just dropped a bomb. But the response by Howard and by me and by Orrin, I think, set an example. And we said, you know, that is a fantastic question. And we don't know the answer to that question. But I will tell you, we're going to talk to you and other people in the company and understand why we don't have that. And at that time, we hired a guy to come in and help us. And that began the process. And from then on, I think, as you see on the Starbucks board, I think there's 2 or 3 people of color or more now, maybe 5 people of color. There's almost half the board is female. And it has significantly changed our company. But even with all of that, good intentions don't count for actions. And so I think that Starbucks has to continue to act in a manner that lives up to its guiding principles and its mission statement.
Yeah, no, that's a great example and great story. Someone commented here that they love your dedication to servant leadership, your messages on social media, and they love hearing these stories. And I was going to say the same thing, that I follow you and I love what you're sharing on LinkedIn, and that's where I mainly see your work, or the work that you're promoting. So, well, great. Here's another question, or maybe just a comment. Let me see. Howard's done so much for so many people over the years. Personally, he's a beloved mentor and leader for me, and I will always be grateful. This comes from Marie Gill. Howard, how can we practically guide others, companies or communities, even when the culture does not make servant leadership a priority?
Well, you have to live it yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't, talk is cheap. And so if you believe in the tenets of servant leadership, then you need to understand them and you need to know what makes them work. And then you have to talk about them all the time. Whenever you get a chance, wherever you are, in any venue with any group of people, talk about servant leadership. Talk about why it's important and how it can change the world in which we live. You know, I have spent pretty much my whole adult life talking about servant leadership. In the early days, I couldn't put any words to it. I didn't understand it. And then somebody gave me the book, little pamphlet by Robert Greenleaf, The Leader and Servant. And that began my journey. And the first thing you have to do if you want to become a servant leader is you have to understand yourself. You have to learn to lead yourself as a servant. And once you do that, then you can begin to at least start the process of helping other people understand. And so, but you've got to live it. Talk doesn't do the work. You have to live it. And that's what I've always tried to do. Even when it's, servant leadership comes with a cost sometimes. It's not just free. That means that you've got to put other people before yourself. And sometimes that not costs you emotionally, sometimes it costs you economically, but that's what it takes, you know?
Well, I think what you're really describing is leaders have to get their ego out of the way.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
exactly. That word, we use it a lot today. Leaders have to be vulnerable, but they really have to be vulnerable. They've
yeah,
got to put themselves out there. They got to put their fears out there. They got to help, share themselves with their people in an honest, open way that will let their people really understand who they are and invite their people to hold them accountable for what they say their values are.
I love that. Excellent. Well, we're going to wait for more questions here. We've got some really good comments. Someone here says, I was excited to see Roz Brewer join the company.
Yeah.
So,
Roz was actually on the board. She came to us from Sam's Club, and I forget where she was before that, but she was on the board of Starbucks, and they plucked her from the board. And I don't really know her. I have seen her a few times. I haven't met her yet, but everything that I hear is good.
yeah, Walmart, I guess. Well, I want to switch gears here a little bit and continue to put questions in the chat as they emerge. But my passion right now, Howard, is legacy, and particularly leaders' legacy. And so when I use the word legacy, just what does the word mean to you? It's very open-ended, I know.
It's what you leave behind that lasts, right? It isn't the money you give away, but it's the values that you give away, so to speak. It goes on long after you leave this earth. People have always said, well, what's your most proudest thing from Starbucks? I said, well, it's the people that I built bridges for and helped them gently cross and then broke the bridge behind them, as Leo Buscaglia said that my job is to help people grow as individuals and then help them go on to achieve great things, whether they're at Starbucks or they're someplace else. I want them to achieve the goals that they want in their lives and to become a better human being. If I've done that, then that helps to build a legacy. When I'm old now, but when I'm really old and I'm sitting in my rocking chair in the nursing home, and I want somebody to come up to me and say, Howard, Starbucks set out to be one of the most well-known organizations in the world, known for nurturing and inspiring the human spirit. And I want to show you an article that was printed in particularly the Wall Street Journal, because that would be perfect, a business journal that said, they really lived up to nurturing and inspiring the human spirit. That's the legacy that I want to leave behind, and I think Starbucks should leave behind. And no matter, I used to say we need to president-proof the organization, that the values of Starbucks should go on no matter who the president or the CEO is of the company. If we've done that, then we've done a great job.
Well, and that just is reflective of a very, very strong culture. And I want to ask you a question, Howard, and I probably could find the answer on your website or the Starbucks website. But I used to really recommend graduate students to get a part-time job at Starbucks because of the healthcare benefit. Does that still exist? Or, like if you work part-time, you can get a full-time care benefit, I think, or healthcare?
If you work 20 hours a week or more, I think that still stands. You get healthcare benefits. And we've had that almost from the first year when I first got there. And we gave everybody equity in the company. If you were a barista and you worked enough hours, you got equity. That's stock options.
Yeah.
We started that from the beginning. And those things cost the company a lot of money. But, I don't ever remember a time at a board meeting when a board member stood up or said, hey, we're spending a lot of money on healthcare. Maybe we can cut that back. It never happened. And we stayed with it.
Right.
We were one of the first companies to ever do that, particularly I don't ever remember any part-time employees, particularly in the hospitality industry, ever getting healthcare.
Right. And, that is so important. And I think before I even knew that, decades ago, I was thinking to myself, boy, these baristas seem very well educated and very professional. And, but you know, if you're in graduate school, it was like a perfect part-time job. And people really seem to love that. So, well, when I say legacy, are there any other stories? I mean, I loved your personal story, and that's wonderful. That come to mind about you or someone else, or just a legacy story?
Well, one of my favorite stories that I talk about in my book, and any Starbucks people will know this story if you're on the call, and that's the story of Jim. And this was a Jim that lived in a nursing home across from one of our stores in California. And every day, it was called Big Jim by the people in the store. And every day, Jim would come into the store about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he'd order a short drip coffee and a blueberry muffin. And this went on for a couple of years. And Jim was a ex-football player, and he was a huge, really big guy. And every day that they would write, the barista would write a comment on the bag that they gave the muffin or on the cup. Might say something like, "Hey, Jim, the Steelers suck," or "Jim, we love you," or "Jim, how's your day going?" or whatever it is, something personal to Jim. And so one day, 2 o'clock comes, 3 o'clock comes, 4 o'clock comes, no Jim. And one of the baristas said, "I wonder where his Jim is today. I think I'll take his coffee and his blueberry muffin across the street to the nursing home and give it to him." And so he went across the street, and he went up to the front counter, and the receptionist was there, and said, "I'm here to see Jim." And she just looked at him. A tear came down her face and said, "I'm sorry to tell you, but Jim died last night in his sleep." And of course, the barista went back to the store, and everybody was sad because Jim wasn't a customer. Jim was a human being and a friend, And so about 2 days later, one of Jim's children came in and asked the store manager if the baristas could come to his funeral. All the people in the store could come to his funeral because Jim so valued their relationships. And so they all showed up at the funeral home for the funeral. And as they walked through the door, there were these three big round tables, like the tables you would go to where there was a dinner and 8 or 10 people sit at the table. But except on these tables was every cup and every paper bag that the baristas had written something on to Jim. Who would have ever thought that somebody would save all those little comments? But it tells you how little things in life help people have a better life or feel appreciated or feel loved, because those things matter to Jim. The baristas didn't know that. They were doing it because they cared about Jim. They had no idea what it meant to Jim. They were just doing it because they loved him. And to me, that is one of the greatest stories about when you walk down the street, don't put your head down, look up straight and say hi to somebody. When you're in the elevator at whatever company you work at, don't just ride up being quiet. Say good morning to people. How are you doing today? People might be uncomfortable. So what? Show that you care. And, I love stories like that. And there's been hundreds and thousands of stories like that have happened at Starbucks because they've cared.
Howard, that's a great story. I mean, if we don't have tears in our eyes after listening to that story, that is just a great one. The fact that he kept all of those messages to him, and it reminds me, I don't know where I learned this, but I've shared it over the years with my students. But if you pretend everyone has a sign around their neck that says "Make me feel important," just like an imaginary sign, "Make me feel important." I think that's just such a good reminder, because if we've ever worked for the opposite of a servant leader, I said once, I had someone, who influenced my life, and I swear that he had a sign, or he saw a sign around everyone's neck that says "Make me feel unimportant," because he was pretty good about that.
I'll
So
give you
anyway,
a personal example. Yesterday,
yeah.
I live, but this time of year, up in Anacortes, Washington, which is in the San Juan Islands, up in Northwest Washington. So we're kind of, it's semi-rural, and I drive down this one road almost every day, and I've watched this family take their yard and plant grass and plant plants and flowers and put up a nice fence and then plant plants in front of it. And they just have done such a beautiful job. And yesterday I was driving along and I saw somebody out in front. He was fixing the sprinkler or something like that. I just stopped. I said, is this your home? And he said, yes. And I said, I want to tell you something. You have done an outstanding job. It is so beautiful. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it. Every day when I drive by here, it puts a smile on my face. It's the little things in life that make a difference, and each of us can do that every day. Just pay attention. That's what servant
Exactly.
leadership is about.
No, that's an excellent point. And I often say that, you know, it is the little things. And these are things that leaders can do that really don't cost money. So when you've got tight budgets,
Yeah.
it's really a good thing to do. So, well, great. Well, how do you think people might change how they view legacy, or what legacy even means during a crisis or this pandemic?
Well, I mean, it's in their actions.
Mm-hmm.
It's people are going to remember what leaders do right now, and they're going to remember what organizations do and how they acted and reacted to the issues that we're having. I mean, these are really tough times. This is not a recession. This is a depression. And we have social unrest, and we have a pandemic all at the same time. So how do you respond? I have one of my favorite quotes is, there's no stressful situations, only stressful responses. So leaders have to understand that the responses can't be stressful, right? They can't be, they have to be done with love in their hearts and with caring. And that means they got to pay attention. So legacies are going to be made right now. People don't forget, and communities don't forget, and society doesn't forget. If you take care of your people, they will never forget you. And if you don't, they will never forget you either. And so what is the legacy that you want as a leader right now? What is it you want to be known for? What do you want to have left behind during this time of crisis? And it's important to think about that right now. Are you the one that when you see somebody in trouble that you put out your hand, or are you the one that pulls in your hand and say, I can't do it for you because I'm too stressed out right now? And each one of us can make that decision on our own.
Right.
What we're going to.
Yeah. Again, we're kind of coming to an end. So if you have a question and you really want to ask it, please put it in the chat. And I just wanted to make a comment, and I'm sure, Howard, there are a million of these examples, but I was reading an article the other day, and I won't mention the company name, but there were two different companies that had laid off people using Zoom, but they made an intentional decision not to do video because they didn't want to see faces. They thought it would be more, humane to just do it, lay people off using just audio. I mean, isn't that too much?
Made me crazy.
I know.
Layoffs are, look, it is tough times. If you've got 5,000 people that work in your company, it's difficult to do things, but you have to go beyond during these times, not less.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If it can't be the CEO talking to the people, then certainly the individuals can do it. And if it can't be in person, then it can be on Zoom or whatever it happens to be. But you got to be able to look at somebody in the eyes, and say that I care. And that's the only thing that can make it work. And it's got to be done with love in your heart. I mean, would you want to get laid off with getting an email? This is not new, right?
Right.
I mean, in the old days, they'd send a telegram, right? And then since now, I've heard of companies that do emails. If you're doing layoffs and they're in your building or in your office and you're the CEO, if you're not standing at the front door when those people are leaving the company and talking to them and holding out your hand and you got to love them as much going out the door as you loved them coming in the door, and more so even. And that's atrocious.
Yeah. No, that's great, Howard. I want to read a comment here, and then I'm going to go to my last question because I'm kind of running out of time. This is, and I want to say it's because it's such a great comment. This is from Mark Russo. I still remember vividly the day you called me out of the blue to say you believed in me. Now I do the same for other people, spreading Howard Behar goodwill to the universe.
Well, I love Mark. He's a great guy. Mark
Well, that
struggled. Mark struggled, and Mark is one of the kind of people that he is an absolute servant leader because he knows that what makes his organization work is to serve his people, and they recognize him for that. And it's not always been easy for him, but he's done it because he knows that's the way to live his life.
yeah. Well, that's wonderful. And I want to thank everyone who was, on the line, listening, participating, who asked questions. Here's my last question, Howard. What else should I have asked you that you want to share or that people need to know?
Well, the thing that I think makes leadership work is when you really know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know who you are, what your values are, then how can you possibly lead somebody else? If you don't understand what makes you tick and how you make your decisions and take actions in life, then it's very difficult to help somebody else. So you got to start with the idea that do everything you can to be a conscious competent about you. And and you need to write it down. So I have in my briefcase, I carry with me, carried it with me for almost 50 years. And it's a picture of Howard in words of who I am. It starts with my 8 to 10 core values, my mission statement, and basically my guiding principles, how I want to live my life. And that informs how I live my life. And you'd say, well, Howard, why do you need to carry that around with you? Because I know in times of stress, I'm just as vulnerable as anybody else to get off track. And so I want a constant reminder, and you've got to write it down. What are your values? What are your 8 to 10 core values? What's your mission in life? What do you want your legacy to be? Right? And then how you want to do things in your life. And, to me, if you don't write it down, then it's not worth anything.
Excellent. Well, Howard, that's just perfect. So one of my goals is to help people make the rest of life the best of life. And so I wish you the best for the rest. So
Well,
thank you very much. I'm honored, honestly. You walk the talk, and it is just so wonderful to be even in your presence. So thank you, Howard.
well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care, Jann.
Yeah, thank you very much.